In order to grasp the meaning of much of African mythology and place it in its proper context, you need to understand the religious cosmology within which African myths developed and the perspectives on the world that shaped them. But that's easier said than done. There is a phenomenal diversity among African religions, even now that Christianity and Islam are firmly rooted on the African continent. There is even greater variation in beliefs and practices to be found within particular African religions at the local level. It can be especially challenging for Westerners to make sense of African religious beliefs because, as we have discussed, African society tends to blur the secular and the sacred in ways that most Western religions do not. In fact, most African cultures have no separate word for religion at all. Nevertheless, there are a number of attributes that can be found more often than not in most African religions, and they can serve as guideposts for us in our explorations. I will speak of the religions in the present tense, as in many cases they still have adherents, although in others they have all but vanished. A single god occupies the highest position of authority in most traditional African systems of belief. Quite often, that god, who is typically male, is believed to have created the cosmos, including our world and all that it contains. After that initial act, however, he usually withdraws from his creation and leaves it to lesser divine figures to preside over it. Many religions have entire pantheons of gods or spirits who rule over particular areas or aspects of the world or of existence, much as the gods of the Greek and Roman pantheons did. Most creator gods are envisioned as omnipotent, endowed with the ability to know and do anything and everything, and to be everywhere at once. In other instances, however, as we will soon see, they are distinctly limited in their abilities and capable of making significant mistakes. In either case, African supreme gods frequently are held responsible for the disasters and other troubles that afflict the world. And each religion, therefore, had to wrestle with the question of the creator god's intentions in its own way. Did he or she intend to send evil upon the world? If so, why? If not, what limits the god's powers? And who else is in charge? The variety of supreme creator gods across the African continent is remarkable. The San people, who live mostly in Botswana, Namibia, and southeastern Angola, call this their supreme god Kag, as well as a variety of names, including Zui and Hishi. Kag can change shapes at will and create living things by inhabiting their forms one after another. To create the world's flora, he became a different plant or flower each day, turning himself into a man at night. He later inhabited the forms of animals as well as that of water itself. Kag apparently cannot control everything, as he is eaten in some stories by an ogre and by ants. His body reassembles itself, however, so that he can return to life. The god Jacques is worshipped by the Ankoli and Lango peoples of Uganda, as well as in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Sudan. He is said to have created the heavens, the earth, and all of the earth's inhabitants, and also to have given fire to humanity and taught people how to grow food. Unlike many creator gods, Jacques also remains involved in the world, presiding over births and providing wet and dry seasons so that crops will grow and people can hunt for food. Instead of interacting with the world directly, however, he has spirits, or perhaps avatars, that involve themselves in the lives of human beings and carry out his commands. Interestingly, these spirits are named Jacques as well, The Lango believe when people die, their spirits merge with Jacques. An example of a more fallible creator god can be found in Gewo, the supreme being of the Mende people of Sierra Leone. Like Jacques, he is believed to have created the cosmos, including our world and everything in it. But having done so, Gewo went to live by himself in a cave. He had the ability to do and make anything he liked, but he was lonely. So he ordered that all the world's creatures come in pairs and share the cave with him. Gewo declared that he would give the creatures everything that they needed, provided that they followed one rule. They were not to touch Gewo's food. Gewo was surprised to find how crowded the cave was with all the creatures inside. With all the power at his disposal, however, he had no trouble expanding the cave so that everyone could fit comfortably. After that, things went smoothly, and Gewo was happy with the creatures' company. Happy, that is, until the day that one animal caught a whiff of one of Gewo's meals. The scent was so exquisite that he couldn't resist trying it. And before he knew what was happening, he had eaten all of it. Gewo was furious, of course, and ordered the animal to leave the cave and never return. Gewo named the animal Cow. It was not long after Cow left that another animal tried Gewo's food, and Gewo banished him too, naming him Monkey. Then a third creature ate the god's food, and Gewo sent him forth as well, calling him Man. Eventually, all the creatures violated Gewo's command, and so he reluctantly sent them all away, with new names, and left the earth, retreating to the sky. From there, alone again, he could watch the animals and people roaming the world, forever searching for the food of the gods that had been forbidden them. This haunting story features a number of qualities that make it stand out among African myths. First, it shows us a creator god whose abilities have clear limits. While he can take action to try to improve his situation, he clearly cannot entirely control events. In fact, he can't even control the behavior of the creatures that he has made. Moreover, he seems to not be all-knowing. He apparently was unable to anticipate that his cave would be too small to house all of the world's creatures when he had first had them move in. He also didn't foresee that they would violate his commands. In addition, Gewo suffers from very human emotions. It's his loneliness that makes him bring the creatures into his cave in the first place. He has the joy of their company for a brief time, only to have the sorrow of losing it, and he feels the anger of anyone whose clear instructions have been flagrantly violated. In short, creator God that he is, Gewo is fallible, miserable, and ultimately helpless to get what he wants. That's a very different notion of a supreme God from the one most Westerners are used to. Distinctive as he is as a creator God, the quasi-humanized deity exemplifies the ways the sacred in African culture is integrated with the profane. Even if most supreme gods are remote from humanity, once they have finished their acts of creation, lesser deities typically remain very present in people's everyday lives. They make mistakes, they have feelings, and they sometimes do things without good reason. Don't expect to hear many stories of infallible African gods who have only good intentions and make all of their choices in the best interest of human beings. But don't think of these gods as somehow less worthy of reverence either. For the peoples who believe in them, their qualities have just the opposite effect. They are revered precisely because people can better relate to them, and feel closer and more connected to them in a personal way. Another point worth noting in the Gewu story is the way human beings are treated the same as the cow, the monkey, and the other animals who misbehave in Gewu's cave. They are given no special consideration, they have no position of authority over the other creatures, and they suffer the same banishment. This is significant because it reflects a common and an important aspect of the African religious outlook, the idea of harmony. Harmony among people, animals, gods, spirits, and, as we will see, ancestors, is essential to maintaining balance in the universe as well as in one's life. People may have different abilities from those of many animals, but that does not make them superior. All are one, as all are God's creations. In the story, Gewu too seeks harmony with his creatures and attempts to establish it with the simple law he asks the creatures to follow. Ultimately, this proves impossible, and Gewu is forced to separate himself from them, giving them names as if to emphasize that each has become something distinct from him. But the origins of the creatures are never in doubt, and it seems that Gewu continues to pine for them. It is important to keep in mind that, while the supreme creator in many African pantheons is male, there are female creator figures too. In parts of Nigeria, for example, human beings are said to have come from the divine son of Ika Abasi, the great mother goddess. Yako, the Yako people of eastern Nigeria, said that humanity sprang from a virgin woman who fell from the sky. The pantheons of deities who typically serve the supreme god in African religions are no less colorful than the supreme gods themselves. In Uganda, the Baganda people have a sky god named Gulu and a female earth figure named Kataka, as well as a god of thunder and lightning named Kiwanuka. Additional gods have responsibility for satisfying human wants or protecting people from calamities. Mukasa provides food and cattle, as well as children. Kibuka is the god of war. Musisi provides help in natural disaster. When all else fails, Walumbe, the god of death, sees to the spirits of the departed. As you will recall, the pantheon of the Yoruba, who lived primarily in Nigeria, was presided over by the supreme god Olorun, who owned the sky and everything else. According to some traditions, Olorun was both male and female at the same time. But he was also the father of the well-intentioned but fallible Obatala and his brother Orunmila, the god of divination. Shango, the god of thunder and lightning, and Ishu, the unpredictable trickster, were also Yoruba gods. And the pantheon included many other gods and spirits, or orishas, as they were known, including a forest goddess named Aja, who understood how to use herbs as medicine, a god of the bush and jungle named Ulu Ibo, and Yansan, the god of wind. We'll return to the Yoruba pantheon when we discuss African myths about the creation of humanity in greater detail. The Faun of Benin, you may remember, tell a creation tale involving the cosmic serpent Aruhuedo that carried the creator god Mawulisa in its mouth. The Faun have an unusually complex pantheon that they call the Vodun, although the same term is often used to refer to the individual gods within it. The great gods of the Vodun are divided into 4 sub-pantheons, one for each of the sky, the earth, the sea, and thunder. The supreme god, Nanabaluku, who rules over everything, actually gave birth to the creator god, Mawulisa. Mawulisa created everything else. The Vodun contains many lesser gods as well, including gods who embody aspects of nature and certain abstract ideas. Spirits, too, play important roles in many religions in Africa. They are believed to inhabit everything and to be of several different varieties. Some provide simple guardian roles in the places where they dwell, such as in the natural features like bodies of water or mountains. The wives of the Yoruba god Shango, for example, are said to be orishas of important rivers. Oba is the orisha of the Oba River. Oshun is the orisha of the Oshun River, and Oya oversees the Niger River. There are also evil spirits who lie in wait for humanity and are bent on causing trouble and pain. And then there are the spirits of the dead, meaning the spirits of all people who have passed on, and the spirits of ancestors, a category that only certain spirits of the dead can join. The spirits of the ancestors are thought to provide protection and guidance to the living, and in some religions are seen as part of the divine pantheon, even though they are not actually gods. The Zulu of South Africa practice ancestor worship and regularly make offerings to ancestral spirits, or Amadalozi, to ensure harmony and a good future. But all the different types of spirits are treated with respect and honored with rituals in African religions, lest they withhold their help or, worse yet, become antagonistic. In a separate category of spirit beings are the jinn, or legionin, who are seen as presence in the lives of peoples across North Africa and are also sub-Saharan countries, including Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. Jinn are said to be thinking beings that are not necessarily rooted in a particular place, thing, or creature, but can change shapes, fly through the air, adopt human form, or turn themselves invisible at will. Some are believed to have reproduced with human beings, creating offspring that are half human and half spirit. Some jinn are good and some evil. The good may live conventional lives with their own kind, while the evil may create mayhem among human beings as ghouls or demons. Islamic tradition holds that God created jinn from smokeless fire. Although jinn are often associated with the Islamic world, Arab belief in jinn as dangerous spirits of the desert dates to long before the time of Muhammad. Some scholars of the Middle East claim that the jinn originated as early gods of the Sumerians or Akkadians, which would mean as early as 4000 BCE. That's roughly when writing was developed, though, and stories of jinn may have arisen even before that. Continuing belief in jinn is surely reinforced, however, by the fact that the Quran mentions them repeatedly and describes them as real living beings. Robert Liebling, in his book Legends of Fire Spirits, reports that jinn in Moroccan society, where they are known as jinnun, are believed to live below the earth's surface. They haunt places above ground, however, and travel on whirlwinds. Jinnun play certain benevolent roles. For example, they are said to possess and guard every home and its domestic activities, and they are believed to be part of the inspiration of poets and other artists. A somewhat less benevolent Moroccan jinnun, who is also acknowledged in Algeria, is a female spirit named Asha Kandisha. Lady Asha, as she is known, is said to seduce attractive young men. She might manifest herself as a beautiful woman, or as part woman and part goat. Men who are possessed by her might be rendered impotent, or might lose interest in women until they have the troublesome jinnun exorcised. Upon death, according to many sub-Saharan African religions, the spirits of the departed migrate to the underworld, a region beneath the earth, although other African traditions envision spirits rising to the heavens. In many cases, the underworld is much like the world of the living, with the souls of the dead occupying homes and villages and doing the same daily tasks they did while alive. As in myths around the world, however, they are almost always unable to leave, try as their loved ones might to bring them back to the realm above. For the Mbandu people, of Angola, as well as the Lunda who live in Angola and neighboring countries, Kalunga is both the supreme god and the god of the dead. The underworld he rules resembles the land of the living superficially, but all is not as it seems. And even though Kalunga is a wise and just deity as supreme god, in his role as overseer of the underworld, he is not to be trusted. In one story, a mother raises two boys who are very close to each other. One day, while the older brother, Gunza, is traveling, the younger brother, Maka, goes hunting with friends, and the entire hunting party is killed by Kalunga. The boy's mother implores her older son to bring Maka back from the dead. Gunza goes to the place where Maka died, sets a large trap, and lies in wait. When he hears the trap snap closed, he emerges from the bush to find Kalunga caught in it. Gunga demands that Kalunga release his younger brother, arguing that Kalunga killed him unjustly. Gunza, however, claims that he never kills anyone and that Maka and the others died as a result of their own foolish mistakes. Seeking to be released from the trap, Kalunga promises to take Gunza to see Maka in the underworld. There, he encourages Gunza to ask any of the dead how they lost their lives. And each one tells Gunza that it was a result of their own bad judgment of one kind or another. Suspicious, Gunza demands that Kalunga prove his good faith by letting Maka go. Kalunga agrees, but only on one condition: that Maka leave of his own free will. Gunza grabs his younger brother's hand to take him home, but to his dismay, Maka protests that he wants to stay with Kalunga in the underworld. Unbeknown to Gunza, Kalunga controls the thoughts of the dead, so Maka had no free will with which to make a choice in the first place. Gunza leaves in despair, and before he goes, Kalunga promises to come to take his mother soon as well. In some religions, the spirits of the departed are not just unable to return to life, but are malevolent and bent on harming the living. The Swana who live in Botswana and South Africa see the spirits of the dead, or Badimo, as acting contrary to the Supreme God's will. They routinely try to thwart his intentions, turn his good efforts into bad outcomes, and strive to make humanity distrust him. For other people, such as the Nuba and Dilling of the Sudan, however, the spirits of the dead are helpful intermediaries between gods and human beings, even acting on the god's behalf to reward or punish people depending on their behavior. In many African cultures, ancestors occupy a curious place between life and death. Some view them as not dead at all, but as enduring guides and defenders of their people in the present. The Bambara people of Mali, for example, regularly seek the help of ancestors in resolving problems in their lives, and to communicate with them through rituals. They see their ancestors as the spirits of the first human beings who simply drew closer to their Creator when they left the earth. The Fon of Benin, whose complicated pantheon, or Vodun, I discussed earlier, include gods in that pantheon who seem to be deified ancestors. The Vodun also contains a god named Se, who represents the souls of human beings. Danger is a part of life everywhere, and people of Africa have long lived with more than their share of threats from the natural world. Their religions seem to reflect those threats in the form of frightening, supernatural monsters who often feed on human beings or their livestock. The Khoikhoi people of southern Africa tell of a partly invisible man-eater named Hayuri, who has only one side, including just one leg and one arm. Its deformity doesn't prevent it from running and leaping as it pursues its terrified prey. The Zulu also believe in a one-sided monster, a dwarf named Tadoshi, that fights and kills human beings. Tadoshi is evil, but when it is defeated by a human being, it will reward its opponent by revealing some of the magical secrets it keeps. The Kikuyu of Kenya fear a monster named Mukunda, Imbura, that lives in the water and emerges at night to feed on herders' cattle. Finding themselves menaced by bloodthirsty monsters, surrounded by temperamental spirits, and at the mercy of sometimes unreliable gods, it's not surprising that many Africans seek help from experts in spiritual matters. Traditionally, that help is typically provided by the shaman, an Asian rather than African term, but one that applies equally well to African cultures, many of which have long practiced various forms of animism. It is the job of the shaman to communicate with the unseen spirit world and intercede with gods and spirits on behalf of ordinary mortals. Shamans have a variety of tools at their disposal for those purposes. They conduct elaborate rituals and make concoctions to ward off dangerous spirits or enlist the help of good ones. Disease is generally viewed as the product of dark forces, such as sorcery or witchcraft, and shamans have the ability to divine the source of illnesses. They can then heal the sick with the help of herbs and potions. Shamans also have ways of inflicting bad fortune on those who they feel were deserving of it and have the power to see the future. The rituals practiced by shamans are essential to their ability to access the spirit world and to obtain the power that they need to bring healing. Dance is a critical element of many of these rituals, enabling shamans to enter into a trance-like state in which they can communicate with spirits or derive power from them that will allow them to bring healing or resolve other problems in the earthly realm. In his book, The Hero with an African Face, Clyde Ford reports that the San people of southern Africa liken the trance of shamans to death, because they view shamans as crossing over from the living to the spirit worlds. The southern San, when attempting to heal the sick person, are said to have performed a circular dance involving men and women that lasted all night. During the dance, people fell to the ground as if sick or insane, sometimes bleeding from their nose, and ate charm medicine containing powder from burnt snakes. Like the people of many hunting societies, the San think of animals as bridges between the earthly and spiritual worlds, and envision their shamans transformed into birds, fish, and other creatures as they cross the boundary between the two realms. In their travels in the spirit world, shamans are believed to be able, when necessary, to reach the land of the dead. The Ambandu, who tell the story of the untrustworthy god Kalunga, also have a myth about a shaman who travels to the underworld for the sake of his village. The tale begins with the death of the Ambandu queen, Mahango, who was loved fiercely by her husband, King Kantamba. The king was so distraught at Queen Mashango's passing that he would not believe that she was gone forever, and devised a plan to get her back. Thinking to evoke Kalunga's sympathy, he decreed that the people of the village stop all activity of every kind and devote themselves exclusively to mourning. Hunting, tending the fields, and every other kind of labor were forbidden. Children were not allowed to play. Even cooking and eating were banned. At first, the people were as sad at Queen Mushanga's death as the king was, and willingly gave themselves over to mourning her loss. But no response from Kalunga was heard, and as the days passed and their stomachs began to growl, they started to question the wisdom of the king's decree. Not only were they hungry, they were cold as well, as they were not even allowed to chop wood or make fires. Meanwhile, their crops were dying for lack of care, and their animals were starving. Eventually, the people sought out the village shaman and begged him to come to their aid. Through the use of rituals, the shaman entered into a trance and was transported to the land of the dead. There he sought out Queen Mashango and found her in a humble hut, alone and pale. The shaman described for her the state of affairs back in the village and urged her to come with him to see Kalunga so that he could plead for his mercy. The queen wept at the thought of her husband's sorrow and the suffering of the villagers, but she told the shaman that his quest was futile. Kalunga, she said with fear in her voice, kept all the dead for his own purposes. When the shaman asked what she meant, the queen silently pointed to the center of the village. The shaman made his way there, where he found Kalunga seated on a large carved wooden stool. In Kalunga's hands was a large bone that he was gnawing with obvious pleasure. Kalunga, the shaman realized to his horror, kept the dead so that he could eat them one by one. Shuddering, the shaman raced back to the queen and begged her to try to escape with him. But the queen simply shook her head and took from her arm a bracelet of bone that the king had once given her. She told the shaman to use it to prove that he had visited her, and to tell the king that she wanted him and the villagers to cease their mourning and return to normal life. The shaman regretfully returned home and conveyed the queen's gift and message to the king. And seeing the bracelet and the wisdom of the queen's words, the king and his village turned back to the task of living. In this Kalunga story, we see the shaman not only as a healer and intermediary, but also as a kind of spiritual leader. What afflicts his village is not disease, but the king's wish for the impossible, that the dead should return to life. It is a shaman's job to help the king see and accept the reality of his situation, so that he and his people can carry on. In this sense, shamans in African culture play a vital role in the emotional well-being of the people that they serve. Each is part doctor, part mediator, part therapist, and part cleric. With all these skills and responsibilities, it's not hard to understand why people would come to them with their problems. It's on that level, personal, emotional, immediate, and vital, that many African cultures experience their religions. And it's on that same level that we need to understand African religious cosmology as we approach African myth. Complex and unfamiliar as African pantheons and religious concepts may seem to us, they're an intimate part of the daily lives of those who believe in them, where sickness and other personal misfortune are seen as the product of spells, curses, and evil spirits. Religion isn't just something you do on a Sunday. In much of Africa, religious belief was and still is all-encompassing, which is why African mythology remains important to African society and why African myths still feel so very much alive.